For today's video, I'm gonna walk you through my absolute favorite go-to brushes I use in Procreate. And today's drawing is actually inspired by my current hyperfixation on the Shirley Temple flavor of Poppy. No, this is not sponsored at all. I literally am just so obsessed with this drink. I love the packaging, love the color, and I'm like, you know what? This would kind of be a cool exercise to try and make this into one of my girly pops. So I'm just gonna show you my favorite brushes as we draw. So let's get right into it. Whenever I'm starting a new painting, I like to go in with a sketching brush. And this one specifically is one of my favorites to use. It is the 6B brush. When I switched from traditional to digital, I really wanted to make the process smoother by finding brushes that felt like the traditional mediums I was used to. And I feel like this 6B brush is so close to using a softer, very versatile pencil. This brush is not too sharp, but it's also not really dull. It's that perfect in-between place. I almost like to think of it as when you use a mechanical pencil for a long time and you get that like perfect angle on it. That is exactly how this pencil feels to me. So I use it all the time. I'm not going to be doing it for this specific painting, but you could use the 6B brush as a line art pencil as well. So once you get your sketch down, you could use this exact same brush and just go in with these cleaner lines because it is almost acting like this bolder, softer pencil. You can get those bold lines with it just by using more pressure. I'm not going to be using the 6B brush for lining today. However, I'm going to be using my favorite line art brush, which is the dry ink brush. I discovered this trying to find some type of inking brush that would fit with my style because I don't have this very graphic style where I would need these like really sharp, bold lines. I wanted to find an in-between brush between something like a 6B pencil and a inking brush. And the dry ink brush has it all because it has so much texture. I can still create these fluid, almost sketchy lines if I wanted to, but I get that crisp, clean line that I need for a clean line drawing. I'm changing the size of my dry ink brush, going back and forth between using a smaller version of the brush and bigger for those bolder lines. And you can see when I'm making the brush bigger, how much darker and more impactful those lines are. And I'm getting confident with the foundation of my drawing right now. Once I have my line art down, I'm gonna go in with another classic of mine, and I never really hear anyone talking about this brush, but it is the Nico roll brush, and it is this gorgeous kind of grungy, angular brush that I love to go in with big chunks of color. And it has this grungy texture where I can just lay color on top of it, and it creates this very traditional feeling in my work that almost like I'm using pastels, and it doesn't feel ultra digital. I used to rely a lot on airbrush type brushes in my digital painting programs, but my work always turned out looking extremely fuzzy, extremely digital, and I really wanted to bring back that traditional feel into my work. So I really only allow myself to use brushes with texture built in so I don't get that ultra digital feel. Using the Nico roll brush to just put in those big chunks of color is one of my favorite ways to use it. I was trying to lay in some color in the value of the hair with a smaller version of the brush, and you could see it was just getting really chunky and angular. So I'm gonna go in with another favorite of mine, and this is in the painting section, which is the jagged brush. This brush almost acts as this wet paint, yet still having that texture I'm looking for, but it's going to start blending some of these harsh lines I have. I actually never touch the blending tool up at the top. I strictly rely on my brushes to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to mixing. This jagged brush is this kind of like wet paintbrush. It almost feels like a really loaded brush, but the brush is kind of old. It kind of has those like sharper little strands. So you're getting a mix of both this like lush, heavy paint, but you're getting this texture of an old brush, which I absolutely love. And this is another versatile brush I can use, bigger or small, to kind of get in those detailed areas, specifically in the hair. I feel like the jagged brush is perfect for laying down the color in the hair because it has almost like hair-like strokes. And I'm just letting the brush do a lot of the mixing for me. I'm not really too focused on getting everything nice and blended yet because I'm still figuring out some of the form of the hair in this part right here. And I'm not just using the jagged brush for hair, it is also such a good skin brush. I'm getting a lot of that skin tone just kind of melted more into the face, so it wasn't just like too much texture just like sitting on top of that base I had. And this is bringing everything kind of like melding it together while also keeping that nice textured look. I keep referring back to the poppy can on my desk right here just to make sure I'm staying in the same color zone. That is almost my #1 point of reference here for color. I keep going back where I'm like, a little too orange here. I gotta go back to this kind of like more pinky red tone. Similar to the jagged brush, I'm going in with the Salamanca brush, which is another favorite of mine. If you've been around for a while, you've probably heard me talk about this brush. It is this very like almost like light-handed sister to the jagged brush, where it is still a paintbrush. It's still going to blend those colors, but it's just a little bit more soft. So I feel like if anything, this would be what I would consider my blending brush, even though it is technically a paintbrush. But it's not just blending, it is also such a buildable brush. The more you lay it on top of itself, the more opaque you're going to get your colors. Where I'm at with this part of the painting is I really want to sharpen up some of those edges. I want to have this really nice mix of painterly, but also this sketchy quality. So I'm going to bring back some of these sketchy lines that I lost with my paintbrushes. I'm going in with the copperhead brush and laying in these opaque lines. And what I also love about this brush is it has those hair-like strokes. So this is another great brush to use with hair. Lots of texture, not a lot of room to blend itself into because it's very opaque, but I am loving these kind of like whimsical lines I'm getting from this brush. Is a little bit more unpredictable, but I'm loving the choppiness and the whimsy that is coming from this brush. I am loving the kind of like hair-like strokes I'm getting from my lines. They're not going to be super sharp, super graphic, but it still feels a lot cleaner than just like a crazy sketch. When I'm going for something that is not going to be totally fully rendered and blended and look very painterly, and I still want some of those sharper lines, this copperhead brush is one of my favorites to use because it has a little bit of everything. The next brush I am using is actually a variation on the original 6B pencil that I showed you in the very beginning, and I have tweaked it and made it the 6B but better brush. And I actually have this available for you to download and try it out yourself. But this brush, if I had to use one brush for the rest of my life, I really think it would be this one. It has everything. I can use it for sketching, for inking, for rendering, whatever it is. I absolutely love this brush. In this stage of my painting, I have a lot of like painterly strokes. I have some textured, sharper edges from those inking brushes, and this 6B but better brush is going to just kind of combine and unite those two together. I was really struggling with the hair on this one specifically because I was doing this kind of Shirley Temple. I was thinking of what the actual drink would look like in a cup, and I feel like with all those like fizzy bubbles we'd get this ombre effect, and I was struggling a little bit with how I wanted to render that in the style I was going for, which was a combination of this rendering and line art. And right now, using this 6B but better brush, I'm able to both create those like softer lines that still feel graphic while also creating and like combining the graphic nature of this with this like painterly feel. I have such an ease with this brush using it for liner. It has this really nice pressure sensitivity to it where the harder I press, the more that pencil comes through. What I love about the 6B but better brush is, one, I absolutely love that I can have it be really big because you are limited with the just default 6B brush. You can only make it so big, and it's still pretty small since it's acting as a pencil. This one, I can make it really big and cover big areas. and also still work on those detailed areas, which I love. So I can truly use this in any stage of my painting. And because I can make it really small and still get this kind of like soft blended look by its transparency settings, I can really use this for all those little final details just to bring everything together. Those are my absolute go-to default brushes on Procreate. Plus I have that 6B but better for you to try out in the description below. If there's anything specific you want to see in my painting or hearing about my freelance work, let me know in the comments below. I will see you in the next one. Bye.